So now to the main event. We have a really great panel today for a discussion on donor-advised funds and charitable foundations, and how these charitable vehicles, can help. Can help our clients. So it's a pleasure to introduce today's panel. First, we have Samy Dwek, who is the CEO of the Family Office Doctor and White Knight Consulting. And Sammy's here in person. And via Zoom, we have Ethan Burke on the panel. Ethan is the Southeast Regional Director of National Philanthropic Trust. So now I'd also like to hand it over and introduce our moderator, the co-chair of the Professional Advisor Committee, Monica Fernandez. Monica is a CPA and director at Bekaert. So I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Jen. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see, even though it's a hybrid situation, it's really nice to see everybody. And I think this is our first in-person that we've had in a couple of years. So thank you. In the US today, charitable giving is up almost 41% over pre-pandemic levels, which when I started to look at this, it was a little bit to my surprise. I didn't realize that, given the difficulties we've had in the last couple of years, I would have thought that maybe that would have been a reduction, not an increase. But here in the US, we seem to be very charitable. And there are a few reasons for that. One is that the humanitarian crisis that exists today, both in Ukraine, Afghan are some examples, even here domestically, that has led to that increase. And also the people who are giving, the individuals and the families that are giving, not only is it the matriarch and patriarch of families, now it seems to be multi-dimensional and generational. So you see the younger generation really involved in the giving. And one statistic that I saw was that they make up about 60% of most of the charitable giving, which again, it was sort of, I didn't realize that. I didn't realize it was such a large sector of the actual giving that's taking place. And even though there could be tax advantages and so forth, that's sometimes not the real motivation. It's a great benefit, right, to have also the tax advantage that comes along with it. But it's really that we're a philanthropic society, and it was just very very refreshing to realize. So with that, we're going to take a look at these two particular vehicles that are involved in the philanthropic giving and charitable giving, which are the DAFs and the charitable foundations. And so I'm going to ask both our presenters to basically first introduce themselves and then explain to us and share with us what they're finding in this space and how both the DAFs and charitable foundations are being used. So with that, I'm going to start with Samy.
Because I'm a closer target.
You're a closer target, and then we'll go to Ethan.
So good afternoon, everyone, and nice to see those who are here in person. And I wish Ethan could be with us, but he unfortunately got stuck for medical reasons and has not been able to join us in person. But a great fellow panelist. So as you can tell by my accent, I'm not a local. I grew up in the north of England. My family from the Middle East. I did most of my business in banking. I call myself a banker in recovery. Sorry for other fellow bankers. 26 years in finance, 19 of them with JP Morgan, mostly in Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I spent a lot of time in the Middle East. I moved here 9 years ago. And I have worked with very large families globally, South America, Asia, Europe, Middle East, and the US. Charity actually is probably something we don't speak enough about. So I was very happy that you put this panel together. and to be doing it in such a prestigious place like the United Way. I think that globally, the larger families, charities and foundations are more used. We don't have DAFs outside of the United States, donor advised funds, is a great way to teach family values. And I think that we're seeing more and more families, regardless of size of wealth, teaching family values to the next gen through philanthropy, through involvement. And one of the most surprising things to me when I moved here was the way that high schools force and enforce children to do volunteering. Philanthropy. It's not about dollars, it's about time. And we shouldn't just think of philanthropy as dollars, it's time as well. But what has happened here in the United States is this creation of vehicles to enable people to be able to deliver that in a better way. And for me, what's very important in this discussion, it's not that one is better than the other. They are both very good vehicles. I think is dependent on what are you trying to achieve as a donor? What are you trying to achieve as a family? And then seeing what is the right makeup. And by the way, maybe it's appropriate to have both. And maybe the people involved in each may be different. So for me, although this is the beginning and not the summary, I don't want you guys walking away saying, oh, I should do this more than that, and this is a better solution. It's not better, it's different. And I'll leave that to Ethan.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. First of all, Sergeant Austin, thanks for your comments and reminder. Very good perspective. I'm reminded that something my kids showed me, which was, be kind to everyone. You may not know if there's a struggle going on type thing. So thank you for that, to Jennifer, to Monica, and to Samy. I'm truly sorry I'm not there in person. I did have an accident on my kid's spring break, thankfully the last day, but my doctor said you're not allowed to travel. So I'm with you remotely, calling in from Charlottesville, Virginia. You have to indulge me. I promised my 10-year-old I would do this. He is into jokes, and he said, Dad, what do you call a fish with no eyes? And I said, I have no idea. He goes, psh. So I did it. Now I can tell him I did it. We're good. Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer and Andrew at United Way for organizing, moderating, Samy for the foundation perspective. He and I have spoken before. We absolutely agree what he just said is not one is not better than the other. Don't put the cart before the horse. Have the dialogue. That's the more important component, and then choose based on what you're trying to accomplish. Full disclosure, NPT administers JP Morgan's program. We have for 20 years. They represent almost half of our 26 billion. In fact, it was Vincent and Carlos who actually asked me to present and why I'm here. So just want to own that. That said, I'm an open book. I'm here to tell you about DAFs, the why, the who, the how, who we serve besides them. So if this doesn't go well, blame Vincent and Carlos is sort of what I think. I can only see 3 of you, so I have no idea if there's standing room audience behind you. I'm hoping that's the case. I am also a recovering banker from Merrill Lynch. I'm married, I've got 3 kids. I do live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I cover the Southeast. So I am in Florida more than any other state that I cover. I'm happy to speak about donor advised funds. I hope this is a dialogue and you all ask questions because we've already sort of nailed it. Don't put the cart before the horse. What is it that the client needs? And then we'll pick from there. But I do want to state that donor advised funds are not new. They've been around since the 30s, but they have exploded in popularity, making them one of the fastest growing charitable vehicles. And I just want to, I don't really like the term, but I'm going to level set to make sure we're all on the same page. And that you know that DAFs are sponsored by charities, obviously. When you make a gift to the DAF, you separate the deduction from the timing of the gift to charity. I think they can create some tax efficiency to one's philanthropy. The assets do grow, gift and estate tax free. Interestingly, that in 2016, there were about 300,000 DAFs. Today, we're over 1 million. Okay, so last year, charitable grants from DAFs totaled almost $35 billion. That's a 27% increase. So COVID did highlight the power of donor advised funds as people responded in a big way, funding health and human services. But the explosion started before the pandemic. Charitable grants from DAFs has doubled in the past 5 years. And the annual grant distribution has consistently been over 20%. I believe last year it was 23.8. Why? Well, I think it's because they can be set up in a matter of minutes. There's no startup cost, and they help big and small donors. And my big favorite, they create tax efficiencies and get people out of what I call checkbook philanthropy, which is not wrong, but it's after tax dollars. So my view of this topic is both are great. Just get involved in philanthropy. I'm a fan of that. If you've got unusual assets, they can work in both regards. We've seen about a 70% increase in people using unusual non-public interests. What is that? Businesses, real estate, crypto, etc., to fund donor advised funds. So I do see an expanding use of them, but let's talk about where we are, where we get that family or that individual, and then reach to Samy to talk about foundation usage, or me for DAFs, or anyone. And I'll stop with that.
Well, Ethan, I think you touched upon my next question, which was, do you see different alternative assets going into both DAFs and charitable foundations? And are there any challenges with respect to valuation and so forth on some of the non-traditional? Probably the best example would be crypto. Can either one of you address that?
Ethan, do you want to go first, or should I take this, as you prefer?
No, go ahead. I just spoke. You go ahead.
So it's interesting. When you look at both the DAF and the foundation, we have to define asset classes, okay? And I think that that's the place we have to start, because when we say complex assets, real estate is a complicated asset, right? Or is it? And so what do we define as a complex asset? For me, closely held businesses, that's a complicated asset. And you're going to have a lot more difficulty putting that into a donor advised fund than you will into a charitable foundation. Because in the foundation, I can have business people on the board who are capable to understand it and dispose of that asset. Much harder in a DAF, especially if it's in the hands of a financial institution that really does not want to handle a closely held business, okay? We have artwork, car collections, wine. There's so many different assets, crypto, which we are only at the inception of understanding crypto. But remember, whether it be a DAF or a charitable foundation, I put those assets into either structure and I can immediately sell them, depending on liquidity, okay? Take the gain, of which there's no tax event, right? If I'm a 501c3 foundation, or I'm a DAF, not paying capital gains, so I have been able to get that benefit. It's going to be more about how do I manage the asset when it's in until I have liquidated it. So if I am a manager of either structure, and I don't like the underlying asset, maybe I don't like cryptocurrencies because they're too volatile. And so I need to focus on my beneficiaries. So I want to dispose of those complex assets because of volatility, concentration risk. I have that ability to do. So I think we're going to see more and more people put low basis assets, of which they could be anything. It doesn't have to be just stocks and bonds, right? It can be closely held businesses. Remember, we are going through, and I've written about this on my blog, we're going through a generational change. And there are a lot of closely held businesses, quoted businesses. People are holding low basis stock because they've sold their businesses and they've got embedded gains they need to get rid of. Charity is a phenomenal way to unload it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying give all your money to charity. That'd be really nice. Although we are seeing the 1% doing that, right? We've seen the Giving Pledge, okay? So it's not that that's not happening, but these structures are very good, both of them. So you are seeing more and more a demand of what assets can I put in? And then again, it ties back to what can either structure accept as an asset? Ethan, I don't know what you'd like to add on that.
Yeah, okay, so as to assets and valuation, I do recognize that a number of charities, community foundations are not as adept or willing to accept complex assets. I do recognize also that Business owners are retiring. You know, I talk with bankers and advisors all the time, and sometimes they're not informed that the donor, the client rather, got a multiple that he or she just could not refuse. And so they said, you know what, I've signed an agreement to sell my business. So they are exiting the workflow. A lot of their wealth is trapped in that enterprise value is trapped in their business. So how they exit that is an opportunity for those in the audience to advise that there are other opportunities. Surely the easiest path to liquidity for complex assets is you sell, you pay the tax, and then you do something. All right. But so long as we are in front of a transaction, which means letters of intent are usually fine because they're not usually binding. But if NPT is brought in early enough before any signature on a buy-sell agreement has been established, then we have the ability to actually, in very simple terms, turn a tax liability into a tax deduction in the form of a donor advised fund. I alluded to a pretty big spike in the last few years of us accepting complex assets. Businesses are predominant. On the flip side of that, people have assets such as just securities, but they're not utilizing them. They're checkbook philanthropists. So the whole dialogue here is, what can we use that perhaps creates some more efficiency, and ultimately charities benefit if we can get that dialogue happening on all fronts. NPT obviously has a legal department. We do a lot of homework of due diligence around the types of assets, and we're really looking for three things. Can we own the asset? What's the risk? And then what's the liquidity? We have an agreement. It has a put option so that if we can't get liquid after a few years, we're okay with that, but we may have to actually unwind the position, but we've never really executed one of those. So I can't speak to other organizations. I recognize that there's probably a challenge for them to accept these complex assets. That's where foundations and DAFs can come in. I don't know. I assume that Fidelities and Vanguards can handle those things, but NPT can just as well participate in the liquidity event, thereby bypassing that capital gains, creating some fair market value deductions, and the 5-year carry forward on those gifts. So I'll end at that, but I didn't address valuations. It is obviously required a qualified appraisal to do a qualified appraisal. We do not do those at NPT. That is the first out-of-pocket expense that a donor or client would incur. There is a charitable contribution up front that opens the account and utilizes some of the due diligence. We did a private equity position a year ago, and I think the entire due diligence was a few $1,000s, just to give you some perspective. C Corps, S Corps, right around $4,000 to $6,000. But we make that guesstimate up front, and if the client wants to participate and go forward, then we do. But I'll pause with that.
Can I just pivot a little bit?
Sure.
Because I think we've kind of jumped ahead, and I want to just take a step back. So let's give an example of a family who is saying, okay, I want to do something. And I'll talk about a family I've been dealing with in Coral Gables, where they approached me, they wanted to make a gift. And initially, they hadn't thought through DAFs, foundations, anything. It's, I just want to make a gift. Sizable gift. We're talking multi-million dollars. And they just did, as Ethan puts it, checkbook giving, right? So I get involved because I work with families to help them structure and think through how are they doing this. I go to the professionals like MPT, Fiduciary Trust, and everyone else, Coral Gables Trust, to make sure that the execution is done with professionals. But we sit down and we negotiate the gift. In this case, it was a university. It was a $5 million gift. Okay, so it's not insignificant. No structure. This is, I'm cutting a check. I'm giving low basis stock in this case. And the thought process is, well, how could we do this better? What's the right vehicle? What are you trying to achieve? So then we went back to the drawing board. So we did this gift. That was great, all done. But this guy has a lot more dollars he wants to give to charity. So I sat down with the entire family and we had a conversation. What's important to you? To each one of you? What is your mission statement as a family? What are your values? What do you want to achieve? Okay, so we had that discussion as a family. I then had it separately with the children and then each of the children individually. And we came down and we put down together the mission statement for the family. What do they want to achieve in philanthropy? And now we understand their goals. Okay, very important. Now we can start looking at, okay, how do we execute that? What do the patriarch and matriarch want to achieve with their children? how involved do you want them to be? Now, in this case, because we're talking probably north of $50 million going to charity, we decided to go the Charitable Foundation route, okay, because we want to have control. We want the kids to be involved. We want them not to just cut a check, Ethan, to your point, not just that checkbook giving. We want them to roll up their sleeves and be involved, right? So what I've done is I'm sending the kids, by the way, 15 and 17, the kids. So we're sending them to Ecuador this summer to work in a hospital to ground them a little bit, right? Get them to understand it's not just, hey, dad's given us access to the checkbook to cut some money. No, get your hands dirty and understand. Okay, so it's what are you trying to achieve, building that framework and getting to the solution, right? Not let's do the solution and then work out what we're doing afterwards. It has to be those building blocks. We haven't even figured out what assets we're going to put into the foundation. We've just set up the foundation. Last week, we got the letter from the IRS that we are now qualified as a 501c3. Yesterday, I delivered the account opening documents to the bank. Now we've got to work out, okay, what are we going to gift? And the client has closely held businesses. So now, to your point, we need to go and do the valuations. We have low basis stock. Some of it is in Asian markets. When we tried to gift the university a stock quoted in Hong Kong, it was like, we can't handle that. That's way too complicated. Liquid stock. But the university was concerned on the valuation, how long it would take for them to get control of the stock and liquidate it with the market volatility. So it wasn't about liquidity. That wasn't a complex asset, but it was complicated for the institution. Okay, so you got to think about that. Now, we've just flip it on the head for a second. I sit on a couple of foundation boards. I sit on the board of a hospital, part of Baptist Health. And when we have donors coming to us and wanting to give us gifts, we sometimes have to turn them away because the gift is too complicated for us as a charity. And this is where a DAF and a charitable foundation, if they can take in the asset, liquidate it, and give us cash, we can be more accepting of gifts. And trust me, as a charity, we don't want to say no to a gift because you don't know if they will come back and give it to you in another manner. So having these vehicles available and having the professionals around the table able to articulate and understand what the client is trying to achieve, having partners like NPT and Coral Gables Trust are very, very important to us.
Can you incorporate legacy planning in something like that?
So I think if there's something I would like to highlight is what I'm seeing in a lot of charities is a creation of endowments. Okay, that's legacy giving, right? Putting something in my planning. Okay, when I die, I'm either giving life insurance. Life insurance is when I die, not during my lifetime. And I've seen people think, well, I can give life insurance as a gift. It's like, okay, but you won't see the benefit. Let's be very clear, right? They can only pay it out when you're dead. Legacy giving, I think, is great, but legacy giving to me is after your death. So you don't feel and see the benefit. So again, what's my mission statement? What am I trying to achieve? When do I want to achieve this? Do I want to see the fruit of my work? Do I want to see the benefit? I'm for having everything in the toolbox. Use every tool available to you in the right way. And I think life insurance can be a great way of giving because you're leveraging up, okay? But that's legacy giving. That's not in my lifetime.
Ethan, would you like to give us an example? Or
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things real quick. NPT came out of a family office 25 years ago. And so sort of in our DNA is this idea of custom and bespoke. How do we get to that yes before we have to say no if we do? And really three tenets. What we pride ourselves on is flexibility of the type of asset that you can put into a DAF, the investment structure where the financial advisor or banker can manage those assets. And then this third component, which you hit on, Monica, is legacy planning. You have options. And if one option doesn't suit you, 1 month to the next, you can actually sort of sign the document and change up your plan. Let's say a child falls out of favor and you had left everything to the child to administer. So we provide that flexibility around, you know what, give it all away when you pass, set up an endowment program if you select that option, or to your point, the example I dealt with this week was an $8 million foundation out of North Carolina, where the mom and dad are getting older, longer in the tooth, and they don't want to do sort of have this hanging over. So the discussion really centered around, hey, can we rotate this into a donor advised fund, which correlates to a trend that we're seeing of some of these foundations. And the ultimate goal is that mom and dad are going to run it for probably 2 or 3 more years and then divide the DAF into 3 for each of the kids to take over. If they have kids, I don't know, but if they do, then they can incorporate their own children. My wife and I have our own DAF, and so we've got 3 kids. So ultimately, when it's their turn, we'll give it over to them or some hybrid of the two, so that we can help, as Samy said, utilize philanthropy to help transmit those values. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up. This was meant to be a conversation, not just a presentation. So if anybody here or online has any questions or comments, or if you'd like to share with us any of your experiences with either one of these vehicles.
Seth, you always have a question. I think Seth is online.
He is
Oh,
online. I
Seth.
saw him online.
No, you guys are doing a good job.
We'll take it.
Thank you, Seth.
I think everyone's shy of asking questions. Well, let's put this another way. For people in the room, because I can see you guys in the room. Show of hands, who is seeing active use of DAFs from their clients? Okay, so that's about 60, 70% of the room. Do you find that there is a predominance of DAFs over foundation depending on the size of the money? Yes? Yes. Again, I'm of the view that the DAFs are better for the smaller donors, and foundations, I think when you get to about $20 million and above, I don't think it's more expensive. I think it depends how you set it up, right? Because in the case of this family, it's the patriarch and his 2 brothers currently who are the board members, and when the kids are old enough, they will come on the board. There's no cost. The only cost you have is your accounting, and then the person managing your assets, which to a degree you're going to have anyway in a DAF. So it comes more or less to the same. So I don't think it's a matter of cost. I think it's a matter of size and complexity, in my humble opinion. Yes, we have a question. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so for those on the line, just in case you didn't hear the question was, when you're building a foundation and the kids are young, let's say that the patriarchs pass away and the kids then are not as charitable as the parents, how can you ensure continuity of the foundation and that the assets are being distributed in the right way, right? Ethan, do you want to handle this first, or I'll let you go first?
Well, okay, so the question was, if the kids are young, how do they facilitate legacy if mom and dad pass away suddenly? Okay.
Well, how can you ensure that the kids will carry on doing the giving?
I don't do a lot of work with foundations, but my guess is the infrastructure put in place based on age is probably going to guide that. But I want to circle back real quick, because I do agree that a foundation is useful in the 20 million plus range. But again, I come back to, what are we trying to accomplish? And here's what I mean. About 2 years ago, NPT received a $500 million single stock position to create a donor advised fund, simply because it was a portion of the overall wealth. We have a number of individuals who already have their own private foundations, but yet they've attached sort of what I call a sidecar donor advised fund. And the best I can make of that reasoning, without having spoken to them, is twofold. One, that they're looking for anonymity, okay, because you can be anonymous in a donor advised fund. Or 2, the asset being used was going to get a slightly better deduction. An S corp, for example, we can receive an S corp in trust form and reduce the tax rate fairly considerably. That's speculation on my part as to the rationale, but we do have a number of DAFs of all scale. It's $25,000 to open a DAF, okay? So it's not that every account is big. I think the national average is 168,000. Our average is about 1.4 million, if that helps with scale. But we do have individuals that come straight to us and say, hey, I want to do a $50,000 account. We say, great. But you've got this scale, and I don't know what was in the water last year. But it used to be that we would see $1 billion month in the month of December when everybody's doing their charitable giving. Well, I think we saw $1 billion month every month last year, probably driven by fear of what the change in the tax code could be. I don't know. It really widened our eyes to what in the world was going on with this explosion. But I suspect that you've got a convergence of philanthropic people combined with an awareness that there are vehicles out there that can help with simple philanthropic planning as well as complex. So I jumped around a little bit. I'll circle back if I need to, but I want to pause.
No worries. I'm going to try and answer your question a little bit more. I think Ethan touched upon it. It's about putting in the infrastructure. So what is the process? What are we trying to achieve? How much do we want to give every year? And remember, whilst the kids are young and they're not yet on the board of the foundation in my specific situation, we have the brothers of the patriarch who understand what the focus is. I'm there as the advisor as well to ensure that we're educating the children, understanding financial literacy and understanding philanthropy so that we get that through. If they're not able to take that over, take on that mantle, then the board members of the foundation have a decision to make in terms of how they're going to distribute it going forwards. And remember, we have the mission statement. What do we want to focus on? What types of charities? Where do we want the money to go to? So we've been very prescriptive at the essence of it, of building out where do we want to have our focus? Who do we want to help? It's not just give it anywhere. We've been very specific, right? So, and I think Ethan said it at the very beginning when he started introducing himself. It really is about communication. It's about having those family discussions. I'm a major advocate for annual family meetings, right? Sitting down together and having those discussions. Reiterating what are the family values? What is the family outlook? What do you want to do? What do you want to achieve? Because those things can change. The people change. As you grow up, they change. As you get married, they change. As you have kids, they change, right? So you have to constantly have those conversations and reassess and say, where are we? Are we still in the same place? What has changed? How has it changed? And how do we adapt with it? So the mission statement is not written in stone. It's not the 10 Commandments. It's not been chiseled in, right? It's a living document that should adapt with the family. So having that communication, ensuring that that is still your mission, right? So the children in this case decided that they want to help underprivileged children. And in one case, they want to help people with substance abuse issues because there's an issue in the family of substance abuse. Okay, so that's impacted them. So that is a driver for them of where they want to be active. Now, that may change. They may go up and say, well, that doesn't speak to me anymore. I want to do something different. So it's, again, it's all about how have you documented it? Have you papered it? Having, a rule book, not just a thought process. It's you've actually got it written down, right? So that you can live by it. Mike, you had a question?
Yes, and before a question, back to what Ethan was saying, I think a lot of DAFs were being funded or trusts being written and trusts being funded is because we had just more time at home to think and we were less busy for a while. And then our mortality became more aware because we were losing people a lot. So that's a big reason, Ethan, as well, I think.
Yeah, sure.
So I agree. DAFs, 10 years ago, I rarely heard the word donor advised fund. But recently, like you've mentioned, there's millions of them. What's the difference between one DAF and another? Are they all the same? Are they generic? Or are there some DAFs that are sponsored by different institutions that make a difference?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you have investment firms that have donor advised funds. You've got community foundations that have donor advised funds. NPT does nothing but donor advised funds. We were started in a family office. We run DAFs for JP Morgan, UBS, Wells Fargo, Merrill Lynch, some family offices increasingly. So you have a number of groups that are out there that do that. The basic vehicle is the same, which is an irrevocable gift to a charity in exchange for a deduction, and you advise on where the dollars go. Our only litmus test is it a qualified charity and is it a qualified purpose, which means we send out about 98% of the requests that we get for our 15,000 accounts. Where we don't send out money is that perhaps somebody tried to buy a table at a gala with a donor advised fund, and that's incidental benefit, and you can't do that. Or the charity is no longer either around or not in good standing with the IRS. Perhaps it's under a review. So those are the only two instances where we don't see money going out the door. But the basic concept is you gift, and if it's at a certain level, for us it's 500,000, then the donor's investment advisor typically can manage those assets. They advise on where the money goes in terms of charitable recipients. Mike, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
I can give you an example. We just used a donor advised fund to, we had a charitable remainder trust that was terminating. And the charitable beneficiary was not designated. It was basically left up to the family to decide. And so what we did, and not to give a plug, but we used United Way's donor advised fund to terminate that charitable remainder trust, and therefore give the family time to decide where exactly they wanted to. They had already met the pledge. It was a successful charitable remainder trust. They actually had two. So they met a family pledge with one of them, and they had excess funds that they could donate. And now the family, and it was a substantial gift, and we were able to sort of park it in the DAF until the family now decides. With time, the assets are growing, the funds are growing. There's different investment vehicles that are available to them to actually, as time goes on, they're not losing out on anything. They're letting the funds grow tax-free, and they're giving the family basically time to decide and see where it meets in there's a very charitable family. And so they've got different avenues. They have a foundation, they have a private foundation. They make their own, each individual family member also makes their own contributions. So in the total scheme of that family's giving, this staff is giving them the flexibility and the time that they need to decide where the funds should go. So it was a perfect vehicle. It was actually a perfect vehicle for this situation. So
I will add that NPT only really sees involvement with CRTs when it's named as a remainder beneficiary, and so revenue will flow to usually kids, but another element added is perhaps a DAF that then somebody can set up. I did hear last week that someone is looking to set up a lead trust where the DAF would be the recipient of the lead interest. So I thought that was unusual or creative.
We're running up on our allotted time. I think we ran over a little bit. I'd like to thank our presenters. I don't know if you have any closing remarks that you'd like to leave with us.
So look, thank you. First of all, thank you everyone for coming and taking the time. And I'm sorry we overran. It's probably my fault. I speak too much. My wife doesn't let me at home. But look, philanthropy is core, and we look at the needs in the community, and they're growing in so many different ways. And the fact that we have these different vehicles open to us, again, no right or wrong. But there are people here in the room and around the table, Ethan, myself, are there for families to have those discussions, enable them to have open communication to try and work out what is the right methodology, approach, execution to get that done. I'm happy that United Way has given us the opportunity to come and speak about that. And thank you to Coral Gables Trust as well for enabling us to do this. I can't express enough the importance of philanthropy. And remember, it's not just about dollars, it's about time too.
Mm-hmm.
So remember that when you're speaking with your clients, It's what you put in the foundation, but it's the effort you put around it too.
Jennifer and Monica, thank you. Samy, thank you as well. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I think it's been said, shared values and culture create much stronger bonds than money alone, right? So it's important that families use those shared experiences such as philanthropy to strengthen them. I wanted to mention, and I'm sorry, this is a shameless plug, and I can make this available if you want me just to send the report out, but NPT for 15 years has produced a report on the donor advised fund landscape. We do it as a service to the industry for people that want to know the impact of the charitable giving vehicle. nptrust.org, the report's there, or I'll send a link, but in it, I personally find it fascinating that from 2007 to 2022 to 2020, there was a 435% increase in grants to charities from DAFs and about a 375% increase in contributions into DAFs. So thankfully, more money went out than went in, and those are not small numbers. And so I just came across it, so I wanted to share it. But the report is there for anyone to utilize. Costs nothing for you, but I encourage a review of it just to see what's happening, because it's a wonderful shift, and we are all on the same page. Our mission is to help put capital into the social sector. Whether you do that through a DAF or a foundation, the end result is the same, and that is that charities win. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Samy and Ethan. And thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge in this area, and we greatly appreciate it. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jen.
I don't have much to say. I just wanted to thank the panel. That was a really terrific discussion. I think we all learned a lot, and it was just a great conversation. Great to see people in person again. I'm so happy that we were able to do this. And I just want to thank you all for being here, and have a great
I'm jealous. I'm jealous I'm not in person.
We miss you, Ethan.
Yes, happy healing.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Take care.